Many years ago, in a beautiful and prosperous town called Asaba, sitting in the heart of South Nigeria, there lived a man named Neto. Neto was married to a beautiful lady named Nkoli. They were both poor. Neto was a mechanic and Nkoli was a tailor. Both of them were struggling to make ends meet. They could barely afford to feed themselves and their 6-year-old son, Chimdi. It was as though they were under a spell. Nothing they did ever prospered. Neto was once a trader and dealer in motor spare parts, and when it looked as if his business was about to take off and prosper, his shop suddenly got burnt to the ground. He lost all his belongings, and this had happened twice. So Neto decided to give up on his dream of being a big-time businessman, a big distributor and dealer in motor spare parts. He decided to learn a skill instead. So he decided to train to become a mechanic. That way, even if his workshop was ever to get burnt to the ground again, the knowledge and skill that he would have acquired will never leave him, not even if he lost every materials therein. He would not lose his talent. But even at that time, he was still struggling as a mechanic. His best friend, Lutanna, who had served the same master with him and was also settled almost the same time as he was settled, was now very rich and even living in his own house. And even now, he had boys working for him in his workshop. But Neto was still struggling and finding it difficult to feed just himself, his wife, and his little son. This bothered him so much that he would bury his head at night and cry himself to sleep. He was ashamed of himself. He wondered what was wrong with him. He knew that he was a very good mechanic and there was no fault in any type of car that he could not fix. Sometimes, even his best friend Lutanna, who was now very rich and had a big workshop, despite how big his workshop was, would not be able to fix some faults in some cars, and he would send them over to Neto, and Neto will be able to fix it. Nkoli was always very sad. She wondered why they were still very poor, despite how skillful and hardworking her husband was. One day, he was at her shop, sewing some customers' clothes, while their son Chimdi was playing on the floor, as he did not go to school because Neto could not afford to send him to a private school and did not want to send him to a government school because he was their only child and were not sure that he would be properly cared for. So instead, she took him to her shop, and whenever she was not so busy, she would make out at least 2 or 3 hours of her time to teach her son from the little that she knew. When her husband Neto rushed into her shop and said, "Close up for the day, we need to go home. Please pack up," Neto said frantically as he picked up his son while waiting for his wife to lock up. "Is everything okay?" Nkoli asked. "You are scaring me." "Oh, what is it? Please say something," Nkoli said, looking so worried. "Everything is fine. Please hurry up," Neto said. And a few minutes later, they arrived at their home, and Neto looked sternly at his wife for a minute and said, "Nkoli, I'm tired of this poverty. I am really tired. God knows I've tried my best and I don't know what to do again at this point. I work very hard. I pray. I fast. I am a good person, yet nothing seemed to be working for me," Neto said, looking very sad. It's okay, my husband. I know it's not easy, but please let us continue to wait on God. God's time is the best, and I'm sure He will come through for us very soon. He doesn't sleep, Nkoli said, trying to comfort her husband. Me, I am tired of waiting, oh. I am tired of waiting on God. I have only called you to let you know that first thing in the morning, I am following Lotanna. You know Lotanna, my friend. We will go to see a Baba that can solve our problems and make us rich. Although he said I should not tell you, but there is nothing I cannot tell my wife. I cannot hide anything from you. So I just thought it wise to let you know, so we could both go together. But if you refuse, I would go on my own, Neto said. Nkoli was very shocked. She screamed and said, Neto, do you want to do money ritual? Go where? I am finished though, I am finished. Somebody help me. So this is how your friend Lotanna made his wealth. I am finished, Nkoli shouted, crying. Oh, bring down your voice now. Ha! Do you want to wake the whole neighborhood? You want them to hear what we are talking about? Please, Nkoli, you are not tired of this poverty, and all this while, I thought Lotanna was just lucky. I did not know that he did money ritual until I went to see him yesterday to beg him to please help my life, Neto said. Nkoli screamed further. Ah, Neto, but you know all these things come at a heavy price. The devil does not give you anything for free. They may even ask you to kill a human being. Neto, are you hearing what you are saying? Ah, I am finished, she cried further. Nobody's asking for human blood. Lotanna is my best friend, and I trust him with my life. He told me that Baba only requested for the blood of one big cow. He did not kill any human being. If you remember that day that Lotanna threw a big party and killed a cow just 3 months after he got married, that I told you that it was a foolish idea as he just spent a lot of money on his wedding. Well, that was the time he used the blood of the cow for the money ritual, and it's been almost 4 years. Have you seen his wife or his mother or father or any of his children die? He did not use any human being. It was the blood of a cow that he used. And Lotanna has even promised me that he would borrow me the money to buy cow and I could pay later when we become rich, Neto said, trying to convince his wife. Throughout that night, Nkoli could not sleep. She thought about all that her husband had said. She was glad that her husband had trusted her enough to tell her, unlike Lotanna, who did not tell his wife. And so she decided that she was going to follow her husband, not just because he trusted her and told her, but also because she would want to be there firsthand, just in case the Baba asks for human life, so that her husband will not use her for rituals. So the following morning, Neto and his wife Nkoli, followed by Lotanna, went to see Baba. At the Baba shrine, Baba did some incantations and enchantments and made some signs, and then said, "Welcome, my children. The poverty in your lineage is very strong, and the gods have requested the blood of the most precious person in your lives," the Baba said, looking at Neto. "Ah, but I thought you said that it does not require the blood of human," Neto said, looking very afraid. "And if I told you the whole truth, you would not have agreed to follow me, Neto," Lotanna responded. "Ah, Lotanna, you have finished me. Baba, the person that I love the most, that is most precious to me, is my wife, and I'm the one she loves the most as well in the whole world." Neto turned to his wife, who was already in tears. "Ah, Baba, we are both here, so who will not be used? Ah, Baba, please, there needs to be another way," Neto said sadly. "My child, I said the person you both love the most, and it's neither of you. You both love your son the most, and the gods have requested for his blood, the Baba said. My son, Chimdi, God forbid, Nkoli interjected, and with that she immediately picked up her bags and ran away from the shrine, screaming and crying. Nato also got up and ran after her. Nkoli, wait for me, please, wait. But Nkoli did not heed to his call. She continued running and running, heading straight for her home. Lotana, on the other hand, apologized to the Baba and reassured him that they will be back shortly. Then he followed quickly after his friends, calling on him to stop and listen to his new plan. But he wouldn't stop, only running after his wife. On getting to the house, Nkoli hugged her son, crying and weeping bitterly. And the days that followed, she made sure that Chidi was never out of her sight. She also refused to speak to her husband. She was so upset with him. However, after a week, Nato called her and said, Nkoli, for how long will this continue? How long will you keep malice with me? Let's talk. See, we can always have more children. Giving Chimdi in exchange for wealth is a sacrifice we would be making for ourselves and our unborn children. Besides, Chimdi can still reincarnate. That way, we would not even have to miss him that much. We wouldn't have lost him entirely, Nato said, pleading with his wife. Nato, you knew how long we waited before we had Chimdi, and you know what the doctor said, that I would never be able to have more children. Yet, you want me to sacrifice the only one that I have. Also, how will you be able to sleep at night knowing that you killed your own child with your own hands, Nato? Do you know that you are very wicked? Nkoli said, crying. No, Nkoli. If we do this, you know that we will be able to afford the best medical care, and I assure you that we would have as many children as we want. Also, we will not be killing anyone with our hands. We will only be killing a cow. We will only take our son's picture and a cow to the Baba, and after he does some incantations, we will use the cow and throw a party, and in the night our son will sleep off and will not wake up the following morning. It would be a painless death and no one will find out. Please, Nkoli, for the sake of our suffering, please consider. Please, he told me that he used his twin sister and that was how she died. It was painless and raised no suspicion, Nato said as he continued begging Nkoli. Nkoli could not believe her ears. She was very angry with Nato for insisting that they should use their son for money ritual, their only son. 2 weeks later, Nkoli walked into her sitting room only to see her husband attempting to drink a poisonous substance just to take his life. What are you trying to do? Nkoli asked as she dragged the cup away from his mouth. Since you don't want me to agree for us to use our son, let me kill myself rather than continue to wallow in poverty, Nato said, faking tears. And he even began to keep to himself and began to emotionally blackmail her. Each time Nkoli passed his side, he will start singing a pathetic and sorrowful song. My life is useless. Oh, what will I do? What will I do, poverty? Poverty has killed me. Poverty has finished me. Poverty, come and kill me. And Nato will continue like this, emotionally blackmailing her. After a few days, Nkoli could no longer take it. She gave in to her husband's emotional blackmail and informed him that she was ready to let them sacrifice their son because she loved him so much and could not afford to lose him. Nato was so happy. He thanked Nkoli so much and promised her that she was never going to regret it. So in a few days, Neto and Nkoli went back to the Baba with the cow and with a picture of their only son. Baba made all the incantations on the cow and they went back home and threw a big party. People came around drinking and eating, although they did not understand why or what they were celebrating. Neto was very happy. As for him, that party marked the end of his suffering and poverty. Nkoli, on the other hand, had faked a smile all through. She was dying inside. But after everyone had gone home, she just stayed and wept. She wept and wept, and even her husband could not console her. Nkoli stayed awake all night, through the night, waiting to receive a call from her mother that her son Chimdi was no more. Prior to that day, in order not to raise suspicion, her husband Neto had dropped off their son at their mother's house. But after a few hours of fighting sleep, Nkoli later dozed off. Few hours later, she woke up to the screams and wailing of her husband. "The strength of my youth, why have you left us so early?" he said, as he cried crocodile tears. He was also surrounded by his neighbors who tried comforting him. Nkoli, on the other hand, wept uncontrollably. It was as though a part of her had died. The following weeks after the death of Chimdi, Nkoli and Neto were not in speaking terms. They mourned separately and individually. However, a few months after the death of their son, the tension between Neto and Nkoli had eased greatly. Neto began to prosper very quickly. In a few months, he had moved from a tattered house into his own beautiful mansion in more serene neighborhood. Neto even had bought 2 brand new cars for himself and his wife. He also opened a very big workshop and had several boys working for him. He was always busy. Everyone wanted him to repair their faulty cars. In his workshop, Neto was so happy. He was finally living the life of affluence that he had always dreamt of and desired. He had so much money now that he did not even know what to do with it. His wife, Nkoli, on the other hand, was living a luxurious life. She started wearing gold and expensive lace. She spent millions of naira in shopping for clothes, shoes, wigs, and everything in between. Whatever she wanted, she got. She even stopped working and closed down her shop completely. She just stayed at home all day, looking beautiful and admiring herself. She had several maids that cooked, cleaned, and felt that she had paid the ultimate price of sacrificing her child, so she needed to sit down and enjoy the wealth that her child brought. Neto and Nkoli were so happy. They started associating with the creme de la creme of the society. They loved their new life, and things continued like that for 2 years. However, Neto and Nkoli began to crave for and long for the cry of a baby in their home. The home was too quiet. It was only filled with maids and drivers, so this marked the beginning of Nkoli's visit to several hospitals in search of a child of her own. She went to the very best hospitals because they could afford it, yet nothing seemed to be working. All the doctors still gave her the same verdict that she would not be able to be pregnant again. Nkoli tried multiple IVFs, but it failed. Neto was getting very frustrated that they could not have a child. The couple began to fight and quarrel all the time. Their home was no longer filled with love and laughter. After a few months, Nkoli noticed that her husband had begun to change drastically. He now kept late night and no longer ate at home. He was also now particular about how he dressed and smelled. He barely spoke to her. Meanwhile, Neto had started seeing one small beautiful girl named Cassie. She was just 19 years old. But she had Neto wrapped round her arms and waist. Nato had met Cassie at the club one day and they had both kicked it off instantly. He always complained about his wife to Cassie, about how she was unable to give him just one child, and Cassie would listen to him and comfort him. And before he knew what was happening, he had fallen head over heels in love with Cassie. Nato and Cassie began to date and meet themselves discreetly in hotels. So one day, Nato had come to visit Cassie as usual. When Cassie broke the good news to him and said, "Babe, I have something to tell you," Cassie said, sounding very excited, "What is it? What is it, please? Tell me," Nato replied, looking anxious. "Well, I am pregnant," Cassie shouted excitedly. Nato could not believe his ears. He immediately hugged her and carried her up, thanking her, saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. I am going to be a father again. Thank you, Cassie," Nato said excitedly. And in the weeks that followed, Nato began to pay more attention and shower more love to Cassie. He barely went home. Meanwhile, his wife Nkoli would be at home crying and weeping. She even began to regret why she agreed to use her son for money ritual. She was always sad. Few months later, Nkoli was at home, just sitting and relaxed in her home, when suddenly her husband, who had been away for over 3 weeks, walked in with a heavily pregnant Cassie. Cassie came in with her luggages. She did not even wait to be introduced. She just went to the chair and sat down majestically. Nkoli looked shocked at the pregnant lady, who made herself very comfortable in her own home. Then she turned to look at her husband. She was very shocked and confused and asked Nato what the meaning of this nonsense was. Fine, Nkoli, this is my new wife," Nato replied. "She is Cassie, the mother of my unborn children. As you can see, she's expecting a baby, something you clearly cannot do after all the money I have wasted on you from one treatment to the other." "Did you just say your money? Have you forgotten so soon what I had to sacrifice to give us this money, so you have suddenly developed amnesia? Nato, you are wicked." "Ah, men are indeed scum," Nkoli said, crying. However, things got worse for Nkoli in her home, and despite how young Cassie was, she took control and full charge of the home. Cassie instructed the maids that nobody should obey whatever Nkoli told them unless she, Cassie, approved it. If not, she was going to sack that person. Cassie locked the kitchen so Nkoli would not have access to it. Nkoli was getting frustrated, and as if that was not enough, Nato no longer gave her money. He would tell her to ask Cassie, his new wife, for money. Nkoli was always hungry. She even began to sell all the luxurious items that she had acquired over the years just so that she could eat some food. Nato had even kicked her out of their matrimonial home so that Cassie, his new pregnant wife, could move into their matrimonial room, and this was the last straw that broke the camel's back for Nkoli. One day, she walked up to Nato and said to him, "How could you do this to me? You made me agree to use our only child for money rituals, and you know then that I could no longer have children because of the complications I suffered while bearing him. Yet you did not care. Now, not only have you gotten another woman pregnant, but now you can no longer allow me access to our money. The money we got from using my son's life for money ritual. Nato, you are wicked, but you will not go scot-free. That I can promise you. I will deal with you," Nkoli said. However, Nato answered her saying, "Let me hear. What can you do? You cannot do more than a dead rat. Besides, you keep on saying my son, my son. Was he not also my son? Did I force you? Did we not both agree? Besides, did I tell you to close down your shop? if it was still open. The way I'm prospering in my mechanic business is the way you would have been prospering in your fashion designing business. So the money coming in from the mechanic business is mine, not yours, and I would do with it however and whatever I please. I would use my money to take care of the woman who can bear me children and keep my name alive, Neto shouted angrily as he walked out on Nkoli. Nkoli spent so many nights awake, crying and thinking about all that her husband Neto had said and done to her. She thought of a way to make him pay back. One day, she came up with a perfect plan. So a few weeks later, Nkoli visited the Baba that had given them wealth in exchange for their son's life. At the shrine, she lamented, "Baba, my husband has hijacked our wealth. He has taken all the money and wealth that the gods gave us after we gave our son in exchange. Baba, I am suffering. He has taken another wife who is heavily pregnant for him. Baba, I am willing to pay any price. I want my own money. I'm willing to pay any price," the farmer said, crying. "My daughter," Baba replied, "this is deep. You know that it would cost you the person you love the most. Are you sure you are willing to make that sacrifice again?" the Baba replied, looking very concerned. "Baba, I am ready. If I can give my son, I am sure I can give the next person I love the most. Please, Baba, tell me, who is the gods requesting for the sacrifice?" she said, looking so determined. The Baba went ahead and did some incantations and then said, "The gods have asked for the life of your husband." Nkoli was so happy. "Baba, I am willing to do as you said. In short, I will do as you have requested." And so the Baba told her to get a picture of her husband and also a live cow, after which she would kill the cow and throw a party. He informed her that night, Neto, her husband, would sleep and never wake up, just the same way they had killed their son. Nkoli thanked the Baba profusely and left the shrine. She was so happy. She wanted her husband to pay for maltreating her, and this was a perfect payback, as not only would he die, but she would also become rich by virtue of his death. She thought of a way to do it without raising her husband's suspicion, so she sold some of her wigs and clothes to her friends, and with the money she raised, she used it to buy a cow and other things to prepare for the party. She took the cow with a picture of her husband to the Baba, and after the Baba had done some incantations, she took the cow somewhere else and waited for her husband to go out with his new wife, Cassie. And immediately they left the house, she brought the cow back home and ordered boys to kill it. And people started cooking and preparing for a party. The party began in full force. In less than 2 hours, Nkoli was so happy that she had killed the cow, because if her husband had seen the cow, he would have had an idea of what was happening or what she was planning to do, and would have stopped her from killing the cow. A few hours later, Neto was driving back home and was in his neighborhood when he started hearing loud noise and music. He was shocked and saw people trooping in and out of his home with party packs and food. He wondered who was throwing a party. He immediately parked his car and ran inside, shouting, "What is going on here?" He met his wife Nkoli standing and attending to people, and took her to one side and said, "Nkoli, what is this? What is happening?" Neto asked angrily, "Well, you said our money was yours and that I cannot do more than a dead rat. Well, newsflash, I went back to the Baba so I could make my own money. And guess who the gods requested for? This time, the person I love the most. And guess who that is?" she said sneeringly. "It's a lie. You are lying to me. If you use me for money ritual, you can't do that to me." Now, Nato said, looking afraid. If you don't believe me, you can go to the backyard and check, or ask the women cooking. They will confirm that we just killed a cow for this party, Nkoli said proudly. So Nato ran to the backyard to check if what Nkoli said was actually true. Immediately he left, she quickly took to her heels. She ran away from their home because she knew if Nato returned after confirming that she truly killed a cow, she knew that he would definitely kill her. By the time Nato got to the backyard and confirmed from the women cooking that they really killed a cow, he began to cry. And then he started shouting, "Nkoli, I will kill you today." He ran outside, but Nkoli was nowhere to be found. She had already run away. Nato broke down and started crying. "I am finished. I am dead. Nkoli has finished me." His pregnant wife, Cassie, had come out of the car. She was confused. She kept on asking what the problem was. "What happened?" she queried. "Talk to me. Say something." She was so confused, but Nato could not reply her. After crying and weeping for a while, he immediately stood up and headed to his friend Lutana's house. He narrated all that had happened, and his friend advised that they both head to the shrine to see Baba. They both headed to the shrine, where Nato narrated everything that had happened to Baba and begged the Baba to please reverse what the wife had done. He did not want to die. Baba, however, told him that there was nothing that could be done because the cow was already dead, that if he had come before the cow was killed, something could have been done, but as it stands, it was too late. "My son, you're already a walking corpse. I cannot undo what has been done. You should have treated your wife better," said the Baba. Upon hearing what the Baba had said, Nato wept and wept. He went back home weeping. Cassie was so afraid. She kept asking him what the matter was, but he would not say anything. Nkoli, on the other hand, stayed at her friend's house that night. Later that night, Nato thought about his life. He wished he had never done money ritual. He wished he had never killed his son or gotten another woman pregnant, or even maltreated his wife who had stayed with him through thick and thin. Nato tried to stay awake, thinking he could fight off sleep so he would not die. But he could not. He later slept off and never woke up again. The following day, Nkoli came back home. She heard crying and wailing coming out of the house. She saw the lifeless body of her husband on the bed, and Cassie, his pregnant wife, crying beside him. The maids, the servants, everyone was crying. She pursued Cassie out of the house and buried Nato a few days later, and took back control of her home and all her husband's business. She also went ahead and opened a very big ring shop where she began her business anew. She began to enjoy the life she now had and the wealth she had gotten. Nkoli was so happy. She felt like she had won at last and had paid her husband back in his own coin. Thank you, besties, for watching. I really appreciate you all. Please like and share. Let me know in the comment section what you think about the story. Did Nato deserve what he got at the end? Was Nkoli's revenge worth it? Please don't forget to subscribe to help my little channel. Thank you. Bye.